Hi, I'm Lewis from Animed Direct. Here with me today we've got Caroline from Royal Canin. I know you're going to be speaking to us today about some specific diets. It would be great if you could give us just a little bit of an overview of your role at Royal Canin and what you're going to be speaking about.
So I'm Caroline. I work as part of the scientific communications team for Royal Canin UK and Ireland. I deal a lot with product inquiries and internal and external training and education around our products. And I know that you get quite a lot of questions from your consumers about some of our veterinary diets and in particular our dermatology range. So we're going to go through some of those questions today and hopefully help to clarify things for people so they can feel a little bit more comfortable with the range that we have.
First off, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's an allergenic diet. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, don't worry, you're not the only person that struggles with it. We all struggled with it at first. So it's pronounced analergenic. It's not easy though, so don't worry at all. And it is one of our veterinary diets, and it would be recommended by vets for pets who maybe have a food sensitivity or a nutrient intolerance. And the reason they recommend it is that it has what's known as an extensively hydrolyzed protein. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later, so I'm not going to give it all away now.
Great, so why might a vet recommend this specific Royal Canin diet?
That's a great question. And when cats and dogs have a food sensitivity or a nutrient intolerance, they might show that they have skin signs. So for instance, owners might notice that they're quite itchy maybe, or they might have a gastrointestinal upset, so they might have loose stools. And the way that the diet works is it's something called an extensively hydrolyzed protein diet. Okay, so if you think of a protein as long chains of amino acids, which are the particles that make up a protein, if you cut that protein down into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller chunks, then the body doesn't recognize it as the original protein source. So therefore they're less likely to have a reaction to it. That's the way that the diet works. And that's why vets would recommend it for what's known as an elimination diet trial, because it helps to work out, is it food that's causing the problem or is it something else that's causing the problem? You can use it as part of the elimination diet trial food, but you can also use it for the long-term management of cats and dogs with a food sensitivity or a nutrient intolerance as well.
So you mentioned elimination diet trial. That's not something I've heard of before. Could you give me a little bit more on that?
So if you take your cat or dog to the vets and they suspect that they have a food sensitivity or a nutrient intolerance, they might recommend an elimination diet trial. And that's where you feed one diet exclusively for between 6 to 8 weeks. What you're trying to work out is it food that's causing the problem, or is it something in maybe their environment that's causing the problem? At the end of the trial, you do something called a re-challenge, which is where you reintroduce their old food back to them, because what you're doing is testing the theory that it's the food that's causing the problem. If they start to show their signs again, you know that it's the food that's the problem, okay? If they don't show the signs again, then it might be something else that's going on with them. So that's why they would recommend it, because it gives you a definitive, yes, it's the food, or no, it's not the food.
Can pets have their usual treats when they're on analgesic diets?
No, unfortunately, when we are running an elimination diet trial, you cannot give them anything else, even any of their usual treats. You need to feed that diet exclusively for 6 to 8 weeks. If owners want to give anything else, what we'd recommend is that they take a small portion of the analergenic diet and then use that as treats throughout the day as well.
And what about mixing allergenic diets with other foods?
We don't recommend it. Because you're running an elimination diet trial for between 6 to 8 weeks, you need to feed one diet exclusively. So we really wouldn't recommend feeding anything else alongside the analergenic.
And what about wet foods?
Again, we don't have a wet food for analergenic. We do have one for hypoallergenic, but if you are using analergenic as the elimination diet trial food, again, we would just feed that food for 6 to 8 weeks.
What's the difference between hypoallergenic and analergenic? Because they're both quite confusing words, and I can imagine customers might get a little bit confused with that too.
Yeah, it does cause a little bit of confusion, I'm not going to lie. So both diets are based on the premise of a hydrolyzed protein. Okay, so hydrolyzed proteins, imagine when you eat food that your stomach and your intestinal tract is digesting that food. So it's breaking it down into smaller pieces which can be absorbed by the body. What we're doing with a hydrolyzed diet is almost doing that breaking down before the pet eats their food. Okay, so it's broken down into smaller pieces. To try and explain it a little bit better, I'm just going to grab this, okay? So this is my example of what a protein chain would look like, okay? So hypoallergenic is hydrolyzed soya protein. That's the protein source that's in it. So what we're doing is almost doing that digestion of that soya protein before the cat or dog eats it. So we're breaking it down from long chains into slightly smaller chains. Anallergenic, on the other hand, is an extensively hydrolyzed protein, and we use feather protein for it, okay? And what that means is we're digesting that even further down so that it's in really small pieces of proteins for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And it's because analergenic is broken down and digested to that extent, that's the reason that vets will recommend it as an elimination diet trial, because it will help you to work out, yes, it's the food, or no, it's not. Once you're at the end of the elimination diet trial, it may be that vets recommend that your pet goes on to hypoallergenic, which is great if you've got a dog and they maybe like mixed feeding, because there is a wet option available for hypoallergenic dogs.
And how long does it typically take to see a difference in the pet from starting one of these diets?
After an owner has done the slow transition from the old diet to the new diet over a 5 to 7 day period, the elimination diet trial will then run for 6 to 8 weeks. The vets will assess the pet regularly throughout that process to see what their progress is, and at the end they'll be able to determine whether it was a food problem that was causing it or whether it wasn't food that was causing the original issue.
So what's the one key piece of information you would give to pet owners before they're starting one of these diets?
So hypoallergenic and analergenic form part of our veterinary range, so they need to be fed under veterinary supervision and veterinary guidance. So pet owners need to check with their vets first before purchasing to make sure that that is the most appropriate diet for their pet.
Great, well, thanks for clearing up some of those questions for me. Hopefully our pet owners also find that really useful. I've definitely found it useful, even though I don't think I'll be able to say allergenic however many times I try and say it, but it's been really great and really informative, so thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me.